This is a CBC podcast.
This is Maritime Noon. Coming up today on the phone-in, creating more inclusive communities.
When queer people gain any degree of social acceptance in a community, they are also able to fully bring their talents and can contribute to the growth and development of a community. And I just think that's really good for any community in tangible and untangible ways.
We'll explore how drag shows and church services are two examples of increasing acceptance for LGBTQ plus people in the Maritimes. That's coming up on Maritime Noon. But first, a month after homeless people were evicted from tents and shelters in public parks in Halifax, some have been forced to move again. They were staying at a hotel in Dartmouth, but they were told to move out yesterday to make room for other customers. Eric Johnson is an outreach street navigator in Halifax, one of two in the city. He tries to help people who are homeless to find housing and other services they need. We reached him by phone. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, that's no problem. Thanks for having me.
What was your impression about how long people would be able to stay in the hotel rooms?
Well, hotels are always day by day. It's kind of the downside of hotels. Like sometimes we can get a weekly rate or a monthly rate, but a lot of the times it's really it's not secure. You know, that's the biggest downside of hotels is it's not protected under the Residential Tenancies Act. So people can stay for a couple of days, they can stay for months, they can stay for years even, but it's all at the discretion of the hotel and how full they are or how many other bookings they have. So it's not good, but it's better than being outside.
Right, but in this case, these people were told when they were moved out of downtown Halifax that they'd be able to go to these hotels until a more long-term solution could be found. And here we are. They're now being asked to leave that hotel. So did you expect it to happen as fast as it did? Or was it your thinking that, okay, we've got a little more time here to work on this?
It honestly happens all the time. It's you try to get somebody in for as long as they can, but then the hotels have different rules and different expectations. So I always, whenever I move somebody into a hotel, I always say, like, I don't know how long this is for. We're going to try and do it for as long as we can. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's out of both of our controls, both of our hands, really, which causes a lot of stress for people. And that's, it goes back to the fact that the hotels are not great long-term options. They're good. They're sometimes a good short-term option, but there's no security of tenancy. And it's not good for some people's mental health to never know how long they can stay in one spot for.
How many people have been staying there? And I guess, what's their stay been like?
I know, I can't speak to how many other people were supporting, but I know the three folks that I was working with that were staying in the hotel there, but I'm sure there was more than that. But I wasn't, coordinating it for everybody else. I was just trying to get the people that I knew needed a room into that hotel. And
so of the people that you've been working with, what have they been saying about what their stay there has been like?
I think people really liked it. There was food there, and it was pretty good. And, this isn't the first time they've had to move hotels, and so it wasn't super stressful for them or anything like that. It is, like I always say, people who are living on the streets and people who are homeless are the most resourceful and resilient people that I know. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the times they're used to being kind of it's that upheaval that goes with being homeless. And so we moved them into other hotels, and then it seemed to be working out okay.
We were told that outreach workers were left scrambling by the news that they'd have to leave the Comfort Inn. What's it been like for you and others trying to find other places for people to stay now?
Well, I think as an outreach worker, if you're not scrambling, you're not doing your job right. Like, we're always figuring things out on the fly because that's the nature of the job, really. There's a lot of unknowns being tossed at you all the time, and people who are living on the streets are often, living in chaos, and so we're just always trying to scramble no matter what happens. So it's, it'd be great if we could just build housing for people and give people the security of tenancy. Obviously, that hasn't happened yet, but it's we're always just trying to make the best of the situation, just like the clients that we work with.
And a spokesperson for the city is saying that many of the people who were staying or have been staying at the Comfort Inn have been connected to supports and have found other options. So what do you know about what some of these other options are that these people are now being offered?
I imagine just other hotels. That's what the ones that I was working with, we got them into other hotels. That whole game of just put somebody in a hotel for as long as you can, and when they can't stay at that hotel any longer, you move them to another hotel, and hopefully at some point we can move them into housing, and that's always the end goal. So, yeah, the people I've been working with have just, I think, all gone to other hotels right now.
What are some of the wrinkles with the hotel model? I know you talk about it not being a long-term solution, but even when you look at some of the individual cases, some people say it sounds like a good option. Other people would say it really isn't, and there's a whole list of reasons why it isn't, even in the short term. Well, what are some of those reasons why it can be difficult for people to stay in those hotels, even just in the short term?
Well, there are a few, inherent problems with hotels. The first one to me is it's just prohibitively expensive. It's more expensive than I think any other temporary housing option for people who are homeless. And so that's a big one. It's like, I wish we could just dump the money that we're spending in hotels and spending on all these, temporary measures, spending on outreach workers like myself. I wish we could dump all that money into building people permanent housing. Like, it seems to me that that's the only way, is that for this segment of the homeless population and the population in general, is that private market housing is not working. We need to just be building as much nonprofit and public housing as possible, because, private hotels and private market housing options, their business model isn't profitable, I guess, with working with the homeless population, with the people that I work with every day. So I think the only option for a lot of the folks that are living outside is nonprofit housing and public housing, because it's the only way we can actually have long-term kind of support for people and have long-term kind of security for people. So that's the first problem with hotels. And the other one, like I said, is that sometimes hotels are really isolating. People are being moved from, encampments where their friends are around, or homeless shelters where a lot of people are there to support them, into, a room where they're socially isolated. It might be a nice warm bed and running water and electricity, but the social isolation that goes along with that, sometimes I know I don't account for as much as I should, that it's really isolating for people, and then sometimes it can be bad for somebody's mental health. People need to be around other people, right? We're social animals. So that's a big part of it too. And other than that, I guess, just back to the security of tenancy. Some people it's really hard to know. It's really hard to live when you don't know where you're going to be sleeping the next day, if you're going to be in a hotel again, or if you're going to be back on the streets. And sometimes people would prefer to be in a tent, or at least they know they can keep that tent for a while, rather than maybe being in a hotel for a couple of days and then go move back to the streets again. And
is it true that in the case of the Hotel Dartmouth that a couple of people were even actually asked to leave?
I don't want to speak on that too much. That might touch on client confidentiality, so I won't really talk about that. But that always, in many different hotels, not just this one in Dartmouth, but people get asked to leave for all different, oftentimes it's the people you bring over that cause you issues. It's not who you are, but if you have some friends in a hotel room, I've been like that when I was younger. You get some friends in a hotel room, have a little party, and all of a sudden you get kicked out for the night, and it's not great. That's the other thing about hotels, right? There's a bunch of people around there, and so sometimes there's some drama or issues with your neighbors, and so, I wouldn't be surprised in general.
And so what will this decision by the hotel in Dartmouth mean then for Mar Park, which has been unofficially renamed People's Park in the center of the peninsula? There have already been a growing number of tents and shelters in that park. What do you expect, or what is the impact on that park?
I feel like every time I go to the park, there's more people there. I have a couple of folks that I'm working with that are staying there, and I don't know. I just assume, I don't know if it has anything to do with the hotel, but I think just generally the park seems to be growing because there's good food there, there's nice people there, there's lots of resources for people there, so it just attracts anybody who's struggling and needs a place to eat or a place to stay.
Mm-hmm. How many people would you say are there now?
I don't know. I haven't been there today or yesterday even. So when I was there the other day, I feel like there's probably at least 10 or 12 people, but it's like any population. You go there and you talk to a few people, but not everybody's around.
So what's next then for you and the people that you are trying to help then?
I don't know. I don't know how to say this without sounding too cavalier, but this is the job, right? There's always going to, as long as I've been in Halifax and as long as I've worked in this field, there's always more homeless people. So the job is just to keep trying to get people housed and get people off the streets, because that's what they want for the most part.
And so for the people you're trying to help specifically then, do you have any sense, or do they have any sense of how long they'll be able to stay where they are?
I don't know. Some people think that there's the safety in numbers, I think. So if you're in a camp with a lot of people, I think people think that means they're going to be safe. But other people think that, if there's this many people, obviously somebody's going to have to ask us to move along. So
All right, Eric, thanks for describing the situation to us today. We appreciate your time. This is a pretty busy time for you. It's easy to tell. But thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
That's no problem. Thank you for having me on.
That's Eric Johnson. He is an outreach street navigator in Halifax, one of two in the city. We've been hearing for years from nurses in the region that the strain on the job is overwhelming. Nurses have been reporting staff shortages and long hours, making their job stressful and sometimes dangerous. Tomorrow, the Nova Scotia Nurses Union is one organization that will take part in an event aimed at further sounding the alarm. The union will observe a national day of action called Done Asking. We've reached Janet Hazelton, the president of the Nova Scotia Nurses Union, to join us. She's on the line. Hi, Janet. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks. Thanks for the interest.
So that phrase, done asking, it sounds like nurses are at their wits' end here. Tell us a little bit more about why.
So for a very long time, nurse unions across this country have been saying that we're short, we need help. And this has been going on certainly since I've been president for the last 15 or so years, that we've been talking to employers and governments that we need more nurses. And I think COVID really highlighted to governments and employers and Canadians, quite frankly, just how desperate the nursing situation is in this country. We saw long-term care facilities barely able to cope during COVID. We saw and are seeing now elective surgeries being canceled because of nursing shortage, emergency rooms being closed because of nursing shortage. We have been saying this for a very long time, and unfortunately we're now at this place where we really are seeing closures and nurses saying we've had enough. We can't handle it anymore.
So to what degree then are nurses off on sick leave, and how many are even just leaving the field entirely?
Well, many of our senior nurses that we depended on, that were close to retirement or retired and coming back to giving the extra to keep the system going, have said to us very clearly, I'm done. I'm not coming back to work casual, or I'm going to retire. I was going to wait, but now I'm not. And a lot of this is not just because of COVID. It's because they're tired of working a shift, a 12-hour shift, and having to stay another 4 hours or another 12 hours to work a 24-hour shift. They can't do it. They don't want to do it. And they're saying that you're forced in that, if I'm working a 12-hour shift and the person that's supposed to replace me can't come, then I can't just leave. I have to stay and work, and that's very, very difficult. 12 hours is long enough. Having to work 16 or 20 or 24, it's just too hard. Having no vacations because they can't cover vacations, not being able to be with my family when I planned a day on this Saturday, and all of a sudden my day shift got changed to a night shift, or so there's lots of times where nurses feel that they don't have control over their personal lives because of their work life. And
so when nurses tell you that, what does your union tell them back? What do you say to them?
Well, we've been saying the same thing for a long time. We're working on it. We're trying to get the ear of decision makers. We're trying to put language in our collective agreements that make this not happen. We're out there constantly talking about this issue. And at the same time, as a union, we have to say to our employers, you have to close this emerge department because we can't staff it. You have to cut beds on this unit because we can't staff it, safely. So, we are the union that's saying, among other healthcare unions, that, if you can't staff a unit safely, then what you have to do is reduce the beds, because we only have 3 nurses there when we're supposed to have 5. That's not safe, and it's not fair to the 3 that are there. We don't have that same luxury in long-term care because we can't just discharge the residents back to their homes. But you're seeing now where long-term care facilities are saying we're not taking any new admissions because we don't have staff. And the staff they're talking about is nursing staff and CCAs. So they're saying even though we have a wait list and there's empty beds, we can't take them.
So how can provincial governments then get more nurses on the job quickly? Because it takes at least 3 or 4 years to train an RN. So how do you fix this before that?
Well, we need to look at, is there better ways of educating our supports, like the CCAs? Is there a better way that may be more beneficial to them? Because it's very difficult to give up, a job to go take the course to become a CCA in the long-term care. So is there a better way of doing it? Is there ways that we can look at what nurses are doing to make sure that we're utilizing them in the best way possible? So can we put more supports in place on their off hours to make it so that they're doing less, or they're doing things that there's other things that other healthcare workers can help us with? Oftentimes, in most of our facilities, at 7:00 in the evening, the supports go, they're not there anymore. And so all of that falls on the nurse. But that's only short term. Long term, we need to look at a strategy nationally and provincially on a health human resource strategy. And I'm sure you and I talked about it 6 years ago, where we need a strategy that's going to take us not for the next 4 years, but for the next 30 years. So we need to put initiatives in place today that's going to carry us through for years, not months.
And tomorrow, then, when it comes time to observe this National Day of Action, how will you be doing that?
We're having a get-together, a rally, at our parking lot here at the Nurses Union building, where we're bringing nurses together, and obviously the press, to highlight what nurses are going through in this province and in this country. And we are saying very clearly we've had enough. I must say I'm optimistic, for sure, because we have lots of new young men and women. Our wait list for nursing, both the LPN and RN and NP course, is longer than it's ever been. So we have the interest. We have young men and women wanting to become nurses. We need to capitalize that. We need to make sure that when they graduate, we can get them into the system efficiently, not weeks or months, but right away. Those are a couple of things. We have this new government now has 3 health ministers and someone that they've identified that will look after recruitment and retention. That gives me hope that we're going to have initiatives, I hope, in the very near future. We're here as healthcare unions to work with government, whatever government that is, because we know how real this issue is on the ground. And we'll work with whomever wants to help us with ideas. We're there. We want to be a partner at the table. And, again, we're optimistic because we now have a minister for long-term care, which has never happened before, and we have someone in charge of health human resources. So when you put that kind of focus on recruitment and retention of healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, and others, that tells me that it's being taken seriously, and I'm very optimistic that we will be partners in a solution.
Well, we'll see how much those initiatives you've talked about there bear fruit. In the meantime, Janet, thanks for talking to us.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
That's Janet Hazelton. She is the president of the Nova Scotia Nurses Union. And if you're a nurse and you're listening to us right now, we'd like to hear from you about what you're facing on the job. Leave us a message at 1-800-565-5463. Our email is marnoon@cbc.ca, and we're also on Facebook and Twitter. Just search CBC Maritime Noon. Well, during the election campaign, CBC Radio is obliged to carry election advertising. The following message is a paid political advertisement.
Hey there, I'm Jagmeet Singh. These last 18 months have been hard for workers, families, local businesses. But the super rich, they've made over $78 billion. And Justin Trudeau is giving them a free ride on their taxes. We can do more to help everyday Canadians, make homes more affordable, fight racism and injustice, and protect our planet and our future. The rich have had their Prime Minister. It's your turn.
Authorized by the registered agent of the New Democratic Party of Canada.
The proceeding was a paid political advertisement.
You're listening to Maritime Noon on CBC Radio 1, 97.1 FM in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, and on internet at cbc.ca/Maritime Noon.
And it's 26 minutes after 12 o'clock. Shelley Thompson's feature film Dawn, Her Dad, and the Tractor will be streaming this Friday as part of the Finn Atlantic International Film Festival. The film follows the journey of a transgender woman, Dawn, returning to her rural hometown after the death of her mother. As Dawn restores an old family tractor, her father must learn to support his daughter and renounce his small town's transphobia. The film was written and produced in Nova Scotia. Thompson, though, told the CBC she wanted the location to represent rural communities across Canada, which often struggle to accept LGBTQ kids, something her own son has experienced. Rural communities, though, are changing. The population of the Maritimes is gradually becoming more diverse, and many communities are making efforts to be more welcoming of LGBTQ plus people. Well, today on the phone-in, we're asking, how inclusive is your community? Who have been the champions for acceptance in your community? Have you seen your community change over the years? We'd love to hear from you. The number to call is 1-800-565-1940. Our email is marnoon@cbc.ca. You can also tweet at us at CBC Maritime Noon. We have two guests today. Arla Johnson is a licensed minister with First Baptist Church in Halifax. She's on the line to be ordained, or online, I should say, in line, to be ordained in the spring, and is actually part of the worship team who will be hosting a special service for LGBTQ plus people starting in October. Arla, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Chris Fraser also joining us on the line. Chris teaches history at St. Francis Xavier University, also organizes Priscilla, Queen of the Highlands, the long-running annual drag show in Antigonish. Welcome to Maritime Noon, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Why don't you take us back to the origins of the show? Can you tell us a bit more about the circumstances that led you to start a drag show in Antigonish?
Sure. The origins of it really had to do with dealing with the homophobic climate that existed in Antigonish and at St. FX when I arrived here in 2004. And there had been some pretty serious attacks on LGBTQ2SIA people in the community. So in a short order, I found myself appointed as a faculty advisor for the LGBTQ2SI kids. And we decided that we had to do something to create a safer space and something that would provide an opportunity for queer people to actually be able to socialize with each other in a safe space. So the idea really was to put on a drag show, which we did in February of 2005, and we were pretty taken aback by the response to it. The show was sold out. And then the demand continued, so we've been continuing to produce that show for the last 17 years.
Oh, and so over the course of the 17 years, then, how has the show been received by the community? Obviously, you're selling out now. How long have you been selling out for?
Well, since the very beginning. We've never had a show that hasn't actually sold out and filled the room to capacity. And we've had to go from our early venues to find a large venue. And I think right now we probably have the largest venue available to us in Antigonish, and we could probably put more people into the room. So the response has been really strong, and it grows every year. And we now not only attract people from the town and county of Antigonish, but also from New Glasgow, from various locations on Cape Breton Island, and also from Halifax itself. And Truro. So people are coming from fairly far away to see this show, and its reputation has grown as a consequence.
Arla, can you tell us a little bit about the new church service you're starting at First Baptist?
Yes, of course. We are so excited to offer this. I don't know if many of our listeners may know, but we did have, it was called Safe Harbor MCC Church, that was founded here back in 1991. And it ended in 2011. And historically, it could be viewed as a queer church, a gay and welcoming church. And then since it no longer existed, I had this dream and vision that it was time that Halifax had a queer church. And as many know, First Baptist Church Halifax is very affirming and welcoming, and have graciously said we would love to host this church. So actually, we get to start it. Our first service will be October 6th, first Wednesday of every month that we'll be meeting until January. And services are at 7 o'clock, gathering at 6:30, kind of a welcome social, coffee and tea. And then from there, we'll see what the community wants. If Wednesdays are good or if other nights or days work better, we're kind of going to be there for the community.
And how is it a different service than say, a typical service or other services?
Well, I would say, first off, it will be, I say inclusively queer, but of course, please bring your family that are straight and your friends that are straight. But it will be led by queer clergy and music director. And for once, I'm hoping that the queers, we will be the majority in this church versus the minority. And it will be their church, our church.
So what have LGBTQ plus people have told you in the past about the way they felt in church, historically?
Historically, I think, you've got churches that say, yes, we are welcoming and affirming, but then typically when, a queer person may go to that church, more than likely they're maybe one of the few that are actually, queer there. And, the church may say, yes, we are welcoming and affirming, but are all the members actually welcoming and affirming? I've heard that, people say they are, but then in the background they hear the chatter, the small chit-chat that may be not so welcoming.
Chris, how would you describe the relationship between the LGBTQ plus community and the religious communities in Antigonish?
I would say that it has improved considerably, but there's still a ways to go. Not long after we started Priscilla, we were also doing organizing on campus and in the community, so to try and establish a gay straight alliance in the high school and on campus, an organization called X Pride. But we still ran into considerable opposition from various parts of the religious community, and so and we kept hearing back from a certain number of our followers that they'd really like to be reconciled with the church to which they were born into and have been raised and who have an attachment to, but that this was a very difficult task, and they always felt excluded. There were some members of the religious community who were supportive, and so we opened up a dialogue. And the outcome was that eventually we were able to offer an ecumenical service for the queer students at St. FX. And that was the result of collaboration between the United Church, the Anglican Church, and the Catholic Church here in Antigonish, or at least the chaplains on the campus. And I think this helped to change the nature of our relationship with the broader community, too, because it then became not a question of queer people versus the religious community, but the discussion then became how do we become broader and more inclusive. Now, I'm not going to say that that's across the board, but it has begun that process and opened doors, I think, for people to be able to come out and feel confident in who they are and to feel welcomed not only in the queer community, but also in the church of and congregation of their choice.
Well, today we're asking on the phone in how inclusive is your community, wherever you are in the Maritimes? Who have you seen to be champions of acceptance in that community? How have you seen perhaps your community change over the years? 1-800-565-1940 is the number, and our email is marnoon@cbc.ca. You can also tweet at us at CBC Maritime Noon. Arla, I know for years, being in the media, you would often cover stories about certain towns or villages that refused to raise the pride flag or even hold a pride march. Would you agree that that's a less common story now? From your perspective, what are you seeing?
That question may be directed at Chris, because I didn't recall saying that.
No, I'm not saying you're saying it. I'm wondering, what are you noticing?
Well, I think overall, I think here in Nova Scotia, I think there is that movement for being more inclusive and more welcoming. I really do find that, and and we look at some of our churches, the Anglican, the United, and a few of the Catholics, are making that effort to really be inclusive and show God's love. It saddens me that there still is some of that hate and that sin, this is deemed for hell mentality out there. And I say that because we do have a Facebook page, and unfortunately there has been some some queer bashing on this page coming from, fellow Nova Scotians, which saddens, myself and also people who are maybe logging on to this Facebook page, wanting to find, a welcoming and affirming place, and then having to confront this.
Chris,
so it is.
Yes,
it is unfortunate. Yeah.
Sorry about that, Chris. How would you describe sort of that? The number of times issues around the pride flag have come up at the municipal level, or even the issue of our Pride March.
Yep. So we did have a very vigorous and public presence because we felt that it was important to be seen. This is one of the problems that does occur in rural communities, which is that they're small, they're very close-knit, and there's a lot of pressure to conform. So we thought we have to find a way of breaking through that, because otherwise you wouldn't know the community is diverse. We've always had diverse communities. The problem has always been, how do you publicly express that diversity? And flying the rainbow flag is one of the ways you do that. So we initially made a request with town council here in Antigonish. It might have been around 2007, I guess. The initial response was, okay, we'll do it. And then literally a few hours later, the answer was no. And I don't know if it was true or not, but we were also told that they were going to adopt a bylaw that prohibited the flying of any flags that weren't associated with the province or the town or the country. So it seemed like there was a sudden pushback against that. So we decided to take a different angle. We approached the administration at St. FX and said, we need to have the rainbow flag flying. And so they agreed to put that up over the president's office on campus, which was how we did it for a number of years. Now the rainbow flag is put up at the flag square that they have, the new installation at St. FX. So it applies along the other flags. In order to get there, in order to try and have an impact off campus too, we invited, for example, one of the campus chaplains to bless the flag when it was raised. And so again, this was a change in the nature of the discourse about flag raising, because it had sanction from at least part of the religious community. So that was part of and then not long after, we eventually were able to see the flag raised in the town of Antigonish too. And it's so important. It sends a strong message to members of the queer community here that they are recognized, and especially young people who still, to this day, they face some choppy waters in the school system and in the community abroad. So it's really important for us to be visible and say we're here and we're not afraid anymore.
Well, so Chris, why do you think there have been then perhaps fewer objections than as we go through the years? Is it greater awareness, or is it pressure, or I guess is it both?
I think it's a little bit of that. It's important to continually insist on exercising your rights, or have the attitude that if you don't lose it or don't use it, you'll lose it. So you have to assert your right to be who you are. And so part of the dynamic is that when there's that level of hatred and homophobia, it begins to dehumanize the objects of that hate. And people often don't realize it's their own kids. It's their neighbors' kids. It's their relatives who that hate is being directed at, but they don't understand it because it wasn't possible for people to be out. When the changes so that younger people are coming out, there's a presence, it becomes more obvious that you're spouting hate against people who you actually love, and you really have to think about your own attitudes, and I think that's part of where the change happens. But it won't start if somebody doesn't take that first step forward to come out of the closet and or to support that person coming out of the closet.
All right, well, we're asking, how inclusive is your community wherever you are in the Maritimes? 1-800-565-1940 is the number to call. We'd love to hear from you. We've got somebody on the line right now. Jim McDonald, you're in Moncton. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you today?
Good. How inclusive do you find Moncton?
I'm very impressed with Moncton, New Brunswick, and I'm a United Church minister at Central United Church in Moncton. Mm-hmm. And we've been able to work along with River of Pride on different things in Moncton. That's Moncton's River of Pride. And I've found that community has really helped our community. We applied for and received an affirming ministry designation in 2016. And it was the people with Moncton's River of Pride that had encouraged our congregation to become even more involved and to join in the Pride Parade annually, and in the celebrations of Pride Week, which offers so many outstanding educational events. And so I have to thank Moncton's River of Pride for their help and influence on our congregation, who was moving along on that direction, but really assisted by the encouragement from that group of people. And I don't know, I just can't explain the authenticity of the LGBTQ community and their example and their embrace. So it's been really positive.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more then about the impact on the community then. Well, what are you seeing?
Well, annually when when Pride Week rolls around, our community is very enthusiastic to get together to put a float in the Pride Parade and to be a part of the, attend learning events and so on. And every Sunday morning, we light a rainbow candle at the beginning of our service and talk about why it is we light that candle and how we are committed to being open, affirming, and to being out there and explicit, I guess, in our embrace and in our commitment to improving the understanding around LGBTQ issues. And so it's part of what we do every week. We incorporate it into our Sunday morning liturgy, and we enjoy people from various gender identities, sexual orientations in our communities. So those are all positive learning things for us, and we wouldn't want to not be there and to have those relationships, because it's very educational and it helps us to be better people, I would argue.
Okay, well, from one minister to another, Arla, would you like to comment on what you just heard there from Jim?
I think it's absolutely wonderful, Jim, and hats off to you and the community and the United Church. And it takes movements and stances like this to bring about, God's love versus fear, and hatred. And I think that's just wonderful. And I do hope we get many more calls with people that are, having stories similar to Jim, because it's what's needed in the community is people wanting to make a stance and doing something publicly to say so, to exhibit that love and acceptance.
All right, Jim, any final points before we move along?
Well, just other than thanks to Arla, and great to know that the Baptist Church in Halifax too is engaged in the work that they're doing. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today.
All right. Well, thanks for being part of the show. That's Jim McDonald in Moncton. We're talking about the inclusivity level in your community. How inclusive is your community? Who do you see championing that inclusivity in your city? And what have you seen by way of changes over the years? 1-800-565-1940. And, just as I say that, Chris, I'm thinking about the fact that in many municipalities now, there is somebody who's assigned in the city to work specifically on the inclusivity file, and there's even a coalition of inclusive municipalities. Do you see that at work in Antigonish, or do you see it working elsewhere? That the work that people in municipal offices are doing to try to make their communities more inviting?
It's become a phenomenon, actually. I'm not sure that every municipality has that, but that was in fact what happened at St. FX with myself. I was appointed to do that organizing, to provide that support, and that kind of actual, real, concrete support is actually what has to happen, and you need to be able to plug people into it. So yes, it's happening here. I see it in various organizations. Lots of companies are now undertaking training and appointing people to be responsible for improving or ensuring the diversity and inclusivity of their workplace. It's also happening in many, many unions and also in civic organizations. So I think this is a signal that people have become more broadly aware of the fact that there are shortcomings in the way that we have attempted to do this in the past, and so they're redoubling their efforts, and it's a very encouraging development.
All right, well, we want to just take a moment or two here to introduce our listeners to a couple of people that, Chris, you probably know in Antigonish. Laura Anderson and Thomas Malong are co-owners, yes. Okay, and master stylists at Vivid Hair Studio. The duo recently won a national competition to style wigs for Canada's top drag queen, Canada's Drag Race host, Brooklyn Lynn Heights. So very excited about that. And they recently spoke with the CBC's Rose Murphy. Let's give a listen.
We've always loved drag culture because coming from like our roots of creativity and just wanting to express ourselves in that way, like they're doing such amazing creative work, and seeing what they can create is just really inspiring.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just a cool creative outlet, and for me, like, I love the, you know, going against what society thinks you should be or what you should do. Like, drag queens are like the pioneers of, you know, going against the norm in a way and just being themselves and representing a world that for a long, long time wasn't, you know, okay.
Yeah.
And how does that factor into what you're doing here at Vivid?
Yeah, I think that, like, you know, with creating a diverse environment, like, we make it a point, and it's very important to us to have a really diverse staff, to have a really diverse clientele. You know, we have every kind of person that comes in here, from kids to, you know, doctors and lawyers to musicians to 90-year-olds. Like, we want to offer a space that, like, everyone's going to feel welcome in. And I think that, you know, our space is very conducive to, you know, going against the grain a little bit like drag culture does. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And we have a staff that, you know, I think likes to push the limits with their creativity, and we really support and try to foster that here.
I think people are becoming a lot more free in their looks and finally, you know, realizing that they can express themselves through, you know, fashion, hair, whatever, you know. So I do think people are becoming a little more open-minded too.
So you guys have a couple of interesting policies that maybe are a little bit different from some other hair salons. Can you tell me about those?
Yeah, so we're a member of the Dress Code Project, which is kind of an alliance of salons that base their whole policy on their prices being based on the length of your hair and not your gender. A few years ago, we decided it didn't make sense anymore to have men's haircuts and women's haircuts. We have some female clients that have short hair. We had male clients that had long hair. You know, women were paying more, men were paying less. It made no sense. So making the change to be an inclusive salon, a safe space for people to come, book an appointment. We're not going to ask you, is it a men's cut? Is it a women's cut? You know, we're asking you, how long is your hair? Is it short? Is it medium? Is it long? Oh, you want to do color? What kind of color are you looking for? It's not men's color. It's not women's color. So, you know, us doing that has opened the salon up to people being more comfortable to coming here without needing to explain themselves, you know, and that's the kind of space that we wanted to create, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just makes no sense, I think, anymore to have haircuts or anything, you know, based on gender. Yeah, I definitely think I want Antigonish to just be known for being a place that anybody's welcome and for being a place that you can do what you love in. I think, you know, a lot of people would say, oh, I'd love to live in Antigonish, but I could never do what I do there. And I feel like that's something that I would love to change so that we can broaden the people that are here, which will broaden the community as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was Thomas Malong and Laura Anderson of Vivid Hair Studio in Antigonish speaking there with the CBC's Rose Murphy. Chris, I mean, how much is that policy change that they were just talking about there an example of making sure everybody feels like they fit in.
This is exactly what it's about. I was taken by the comment that Thomas made about drag queens pushing boundaries and all of that. And, that can sound scary, I suppose, to some people. Like, what kind of boundaries are you pushing? But really, it's about creating, when you push those boundaries, what you're doing is opening up space for people to be themselves. And I listened to that interview, and almost it kind of makes me emotional, because that just wasn't the reality when I got here. And he made the point exactly right about it could be a deterrent for people to move here. I had exactly those feelings when I came here in 2004. I had to wonder what kind of a place I was coming to, and it has turned out to be a really wonderful place. And the fact is, there are people here who are not queer, but who are quite happy to do everything they can to make this more welcoming and more inclusive. And I just think that's a really beautiful thing, and it has made Antigonish a better place. It just has.
Arla, what did you think when you heard from Thomas and Laura?
You know what? I think Chris hit it on the nail on the head when he said about being able to open up spaces to be yourself. I think that's vital, and it takes courageousness for some to do that. And I think it's great. And I would hope more businesses and establishments would really make the effort to go forward to make people feel welcome and open up space so they can be themselves in whatever way that may be.
So in this particular case, the change is charging by the length of the hair as opposed to, gender. And it's a subtlety in some ways, but I'm wondering, Chris, when you think about even, Antigonish or beyond, the signal that it sends, and maybe even, signage in communities and things like that. That's another area that perhaps some people in this coalition of inclusive municipalities might be looking at. Signage in itself that makes your community more inviting. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's really important too. It's all about the visibility and telling people that you're welcome to come through the doors of this business or this house. I mean, I fly a rainbow flag over my door 12 months out of the year, 365 days for exactly that reason. And lots of people are doing that in town now. You go to some of the stores, especially during the Pride season, and they are filled with rainbow-themed commodities, and that also just helps to make people feel like this is their town too, and that they don't have to move away, which used to be the case. There was a massive out-migration from this community by young people in general, but also in particular young queer people. So because they didn't feel that they could actually grow up and fall in love and get married and raise a family and do all the stuff that they wanted to do. So that changes Antigonish decisively now that people actually feel they can be here and themselves at the same time.
So, Arla, a change in advertising, a change in signage, are you also feeling it on the ground then as a result of those kinds of changes?
I think most definitely. When you go by organizations and establishments and you see the rainbow flying or you see some kind of form of diversity being celebrated, I mean, that's what's needed all across the board, not only in our churches, but, business organizations, our media, advertising, everything.
Well, we're just about out of time. So thank you to Jim, who called. Thank you to Thomas and Laura for their cameo appearance on the show as well. And, of course, I want to thank our guests. Chris, thanks very much for talking not just about Antigonish, but your, the experiences in the Maritimes in general. We appreciate hearing from you. When's the next drag show?
February 4th.
February 4th.
2022. Yes, indeed.
Okay.
And it will be our 18th year, so.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
All right. And Arla, you're ordained then in October. Is that right?
I think next spring there should be that, but right now, like I said, I've been working as a licensed minister at First Baptist Church, and all are welcome. And please, everybody, come not only to the queer church service on the first Wednesdays in the evenings, but also our Sunday worship services at 11 o'clock, where all are truly welcome.
Okay. Thank you for your time here today as well.
And thank you for the interest.
Arla Johnson.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks, Chris. Arla Johnson, a licensed minister with First Baptist Church in Halifax. And Chris Fraser teaches history at St. Francis Xavier University, also organizes Priscilla, Queen of the Highlands, a long-running annual drag show in Antigonish. Well, 3 minutes before 1 o'clock. During the election campaign, CBC Radio is obliged to carry election advertising. The following message is a paid political advertisement.
Hey there, I'm Jagmeet Singh. These last 18 months have been hard for workers, families, local businesses. But the super rich, they've made over $78 billion. And Justin Trudeau is giving them a free ride on their taxes. We can do more to help everyday Canadians, make homes more affordable, fight racism and injustice, and protect our planet and our future. The rich have had their Prime Minister. It's your turn.
Authorized by the registered agent of the New Democratic Party of Canada.
The proceeding was a paid political advertisement. Well, just a quick note. Some folks have been looking for Friday's show featuring Jessica Lyle, who is a lawyer who deals with wills and estate planning. We had some technical issues just with the audio of that program, so we have been having some challenges posting it to our website. We are trying to work through those, and we still have some hope that we can get that on the air, or I should say on the podcast. A couple of ways you can reach that. You can either go looking on the CBC Listen app, or you can head over to cbc.ca/maritime noon. We hope to have that fixed in the next day or so, and so folks can listen to it again. And of course, if you ever want to hear the program, you can do that. And also another way is to download our daily podcasts through iTunes. So lots of ways to hear the show. Tomorrow on the program, summer's coming to a close, but there's still some time for both outdoor painting and staining, as well as all the jobs that are inside. Give us a call, because Jim White, our paint and stain expert, will be our guest. I'm Bob Murphy. Thanks for listening today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.